This is a really important meeting, as Zareen said, and what I would like to do just very briefly to speak about some of the issues I think which stem from, if you like, the kind of history we've had over the last 15 years, because we're now, it seems almost incredible to think about it, but we're 15 years into the so-called war on terror. And I know many of the people in this room have been through that period, have actually been campaigning and organising. But things have shifted and things have changed during that time, and I want to just reflect some of the implications of that for the way that we tackle prevent. I mean, when the Stop the War Coalition was formed in 2001, I mean, it had two principal objectives. One was to oppose kind of foreign interventions by the British government, kind of wars overseas, and at the time particularly the looming wars in Iraq and Afghanistan. But the second, and this was really important I think, was that it was also about resisting and combating Islamophobia and racism. Because actually when you look back at that time, the ways in which the great and the powerful talked about the justification for war was deeply wrapped up in all kinds of racist and Islamophobic assumptions and language about what this was all about. Now I have to say that I think, those decisions about what shaped the campaign for Stop the War were really important at the time, because I think if we had not had that dual approach, we would not have built the same kind of mass movement that resulted in the huge demonstrations between 2003 and 2005. And I think we would have had a much less significant impact on the broader kind of social context in which people discuss and debate and make decisions about their lives. I think that what was really important, I mean, across this city, like many others around Britain, we had many meetings of several hundred people discussing, debating, and Muslims, Christians, people of no faith, people from different political organisations, all organising and talking together with a common purpose to actually oppose the government. And I think one of the things that we are now dealing with is that the powers that be, the British government, were really deeply worried by the scale and the reach and the depth of the campaign that we had. And since about 2005, they've been trying to push back on a whole range of fronts. And I want to talk about what I think that means in terms of prevent. Because they were really scared that they had, all of the measures of public opinion suggested that they were completely out on the limb. And a whole range of ways of accounting for what they did and the illegal wars that they started. I mean, we're still waiting for Chilcot's report, for example. It still hasn't come out, but there was some word that it might come out next week or two, but actually it now looks like it's pushed back into the summer. And I wouldn't hold your breath about even seeing it then, or actually even seeing any kind of real accounting for what they did. And we've reached 2016, 15 years on, and we're in a situation where there are still British aeroplanes and drones bombing in Iraq. We're bombing in Syria. There are troops from Edinburgh in Afghanistan. There's talk now about troops being moved back into Libya. Well, in fact, there weren't troops in Libya before, but they were bombing in Libya. So this period of, if you like, continual, repeated military interventions around the world has, if anything, intensified. It's less in the popular consciousness than it was, but it's actually continuing to go on. So that's one thing. But the other thing, which is actually also fantastically significant, is that the human cost of US and British and other foreign policy is being seen in the millions and millions of people whose lives have been torn apart, who have been disrupted, who've been thrown out of their homes, who've had their towns and cities shattered by bombing, and we've seen the result of that in terms of the attempts by refugees to move and cross borders to reach some kind of safety and have some kind of decent life. So many things have changed and moved on since 2001, but actually in many ways we're in a more serious, almost more serious situation than we were then. And alongside that, around Europe, we've seen in a whole range of places the rise of racism, fascism, and Islamophobia as well. And I think probably I might speak about that a bit more in a minute. But I said that they're pushing back. I mean, I think there is a whole range of ways they're pushing back. Some of them are, kind of less, they seem a little bit more benign. Things like, one of the things they really hated was military families against the war. The idea that the people who were serving in the army and the friends and relatives of people serving in the army were part of an opposition to British foreign policy was deeply disturbing to the British state, I think. And they pushed back with things like Hope for Heroes and so on, which, the idea that actually that people who are maimed and mentally scarred by serving in the army require charity then to even help them live any kind of life is pretty disturbing. But they've also invented lots of new traditions. So, not long ago, nobody'd heard of Armed Forces Day. Now we have Armed Forces Day every year. We see troops marching down the Royal Mile in Edinburgh, while placards are put on lampposts where the march is sponsored by British Aerospace, who, help make the bombs, help maim the people, and then get good PR from sponsoring the events that do it. So, again, it seems to me that these things are about, not in themselves, sometimes they seem a bit stupid at times, but actually they're about normalising a state of affairs which is utterly abnormal and it should be resisted. And I see Prevent as part of, and probably the most serious part of that context actually, is an attempt to conflate ideas around what terrorism is and kind of have a kind of just a fuzzy continuum that actually conflates terrorism with dissent, that means that kind of ideas that actually criticise what the British government does or what's going on with the Israeli government and the way they deal with the Palestinians and all those many other kinds of things. That those things are just on some kind of continuum and you can easily flip from one into the other. It's bound up with a whole lot of stuff around British values, as if there was one set of British values that everybody in this room shares with David Cameron and people like him, that somehow that's just normal and natural and everybody should adhere to that. But Prevent seems to me to be much more, in a sense, sneaky than that, because it's an attempt to wrap up what is a deeply, deeply racist and Islamophobic set of strategies in the language of child protection and safeguarding and so on. But whenever people say things like that, you always have to ask the question, protection from whom and safeguarding from what? And what are the ideas that are all the signs that you are supposed to illustrate this? And let's be clear that, if I sit here, or actually if I go to work and espouse the kind of views which I do, I'm not very likely to get referred under the Prevent. If I'm a Muslim, I'm extremely likely to get referred under Prevent. And when you look at the data from England, that's exactly what's happening. So, the connections with the war on terror and British foreign policy and war and so on seems to me to be, both of them are deeply intertwined together. I mean, we're looking at an attempt to make the indefensible quite normal, to make opposition to future military interventions, to make opposition to arms sales to Saudi Arabia, opposition to arms sales to Israel and so on, opposition to boycott, divestment and sanctions, to make all of those things which you do not talk about, because if you do talk about them, then there's something deeply suspicious about you, and you might just be about to go and commit such acts of violence. Again, you think about acts of violence by the state seem to be particularly fine, so the idea that there's anything like state terrorism is completely off the agenda, but anything about ideas become terrorism. It's, it's really, it's a Kafkaesque kind of world where these things happen. So I want to just finish really by by saying that I think that we will discuss during the rest of the meeting the ways in which we can take on Prevent. But what I would like to say is that it seems to me that we have to make that campaigning about Prevent part of an agenda that says it's absolutely legitimate, and not just legitimate, but necessary to speak out about what our government does, to criticise it and critique it, and to say it has absolutely nothing to do with democracy. And in the past, a lot of the interventions were made in the name of women's rights and democracy and all kinds of other things. It's nothing to do with those kind of things. It's about naked strategic self-interest for British big business and the arms trade and so on. And that's speaking about that as legitimate, and that's to enable all of us equally to be able to speak out about it, which we must be able to do, then actually part of building that mass campaign against the kinds of foreign policies that our government has is also to have a mass campaign against Prevent and to make it completely unworkable and put in the dustbin of history. So thank you.